Greetings everyone, this is Anthony from Blackbird Naturals and rawmodel.com. This is the addendum to my pine pollen video, the one that I showed of us, having those harvested ones. And the day that I actually found the big score, I didn't have my proper camcorder. I just had my phone, which didn't have video at the time. And when you're harvesting pine pollen, you pretty much can only harvest pine pollen. You can't really film and document the thing going on at the same time because it's just so messy. It just gets over everything. And that was my big score. And then we filmed a little bit in a park in Pasadena afterwards. And a lot of the ones that I found in Culver City were actually a little moist still, so I crumbled them all up as much as I could and let them sit in a cold room so they could dry. And I was really diligent to make sure I turned them every day, and because they could get kind of moldy on the bottom. So really make sure if you are going to dry them, either put them in the dehydrator or be very diligent about flipping them every day and breaking them up into little pieces so they dry really fast, and keep turning them and turning them. And so now we've got really nice crumblies. I've got a lot of pollen on the bottom of this black tray here, and we're going to sift it through this guy into this guy and then run it through this lovely funnel into a jar such as this. As the time went on, it was when I first found pine pollen, it was just kind of a random happening. I wasn't even really sure what exactly I was looking for, and then I finally noticed the pollen cones. So you can already see that produces a nice powder already. And then once you recognize those cones, and that's why I was really sure to document those for everybody so they can finally see them, and not even about picking them, but just appreciating them and their life cycle, their yearly cycle, and seeing what's going on as you're driving past them on the road or walking past them or whatever. It was just a cool thing to finally recognize what they do in the springtime. As far as quality is concerned, that's a really interesting topic that some people brought up, because I know the air quality in Los Angeles, in that area, is not good. It depends on the day. Some days are windier than others and you don't really see it, but there's a lot of negatives that would make me not want to eat food grown in those areas. But people do community gardens there, and people grow their own sprouts there. People live there. People raise their kids there. So I feel like eating some pine pollen there isn't the worst thing. Compared to Sir Thrival's pine pollen that's growing in these pristine areas in Mongolia where the air is super clean, it's obviously not the same. But we have to make do with what we can, especially as far as urban foraging and suburban foraging and wild food foraging, really getting out into the forest again. I found it's actually a lot easier to do suburban foraging and urban food foraging than in the wild. There's just a lot more food around. People have planted a lot more edible varieties. And it's the same with the pine trees. There's a lot of low-lying pine trees that can be harvested, and I was up in a wilder part of Arizona yesterday, and all the pine pollen cones were way, way above, like 20 feet in the air. But when I was in Los Angeles and some spots in Phoenix, I can find them that are a little bit lower. Now I've shaken off a really decent amount already. There's a good little pile there. And what I can do here is I can crumble all this up into a glass jar and pour some vodka on top, or some grape alcohol. Ideally I would use grape alcohol. That's by far a superior quality alcohol that you can use, and it's definitely much cleaner. It's a cheaper, quicker option just to use some vodka. Go with some organic vodka if you can find it. And then, but ideally, and it is much more expensive for a reason, the grape alcohol, and then you can tincture it in that. Squeeze in this and trying to break everything up into little pieces to release every little bit of pollen. And you have to make sure you have a really fine sifter, because after you do this for a while, you're going to see little flakes of the pollen flowers. So you want to get a really fine sifter, because you're just trying to get basically the flour through. Think of it as like wheat flour, like white flour, just trying to get through that little itty bitty sifter. Comparing this to eating, let's say, lettuce or a veggie that's been growing in your garden beautifully and rightfully so for maybe 3 months, 4 months, 2 months, comparing that to eating food like this from a tree that could be 100 years old or 500 years old or maybe like 2,000 years old possibly. I mean, it's possible. You can eat food from a plant that is 2,000 years old. Now what kind of, is that different nutrition? I mean, are you getting some kind of download from these plants when you're eating food from them? I believe so. I believe so. I believe there's a lot to be learned from eating foods like this compared to eating foods like lettuce. And I'm not knocking lettuce. Lettuce has its own place. Like, I still eat lettuce. We like to make things with romaine lettuce a lot. You know, but that has its place, and this has its place. And I think this is a very powerful food, and it should be respected and taken care of and you know, preserved properly. So, you know, do your best to get these kind of foods that are growing from these ancient trees. It's a real big deal. And support those who provide it on the marketplace, because it's really hard to find food from plants that are that old. But there are companies that are providing it, and it's worth supporting them, because this food is a lot different than some fruit growing on a tree for 10 years. You know, or some berries, or, you know, these are all good foods and they all have their place, but I think this is definitely a more noble food. One, because of the properties inside of it, and two, just because of the age of the plant. And I think that's something we should really acknowledge and respect. One of my first big hits of the year is the pine pollen, and then it just moves on from there. So keep your eyes peeled, check the websites, and get the maps, find out what's growing in your area. You're going to be shocked at how much really is. Within a half an hour drive of you, you could basically be feeding yourself. I mean, absolutely. Do it on a bicycle, get some friends, bring a backpack, make a camping trip out of it. But you can start harvesting some serious food. And as raw foodists and whole foodists, we know how to preserve those foods and how to juice them and dry them and make these things last as long as possible. And by eating the wild foods, you just really get a whole different level. These plants are much stronger than your usual veggie garden plants. So a lot of respect due to those organisms. And just get out there, you know. It's beautiful weather, and make the most out of it. Replant paradise on earth, rewild the earth, plant a lot of wild plants. When you find wild seeds, replant them in your area, put them in nice spots, give them a little mulch on top to conserve some water, and you'll give them a really good fighting chance. And within a few decades, we can have this planet totally overgrown with food forests and just absolute wilderness. Peace, everybody. Have a great day. Take care. Here's one more thing. If you don't feel like tincturing the rest of yours, or if some of them get a little moldy, use them for mulch. We've got a warm weather blueberry up here that's actually been getting beat up a little bit by the, we think it's the lizards. But it'd be great to use these pine pollen shavings as a mulch for this blueberry, because it's more acidic. And see, check out these little blueberries we've got. Some little blueberries. But a lot of new growth, but this thing was hit pretty hard. So I'm just gonna do a little mulch here. And that's a good use of it. And that way you really get the full circle with your wild food. You get to eat the best of it, and you give whatever's left over, or whatever you want, to your plants and your animals. That's a beautiful mulch for that blueberry.